upper limb spasticity in adults, the adverse event rates across categories were already low. The AE rate of interest that would be an analog to dysphagia is weakness of the muscle, and there they have adverse event rates, if you look at the other product inserts, of the low to mid single digits. And we were very pleased to be able to have safety results that were also very strong in terms of low adverse event rates, including muscle weakness. So I would say consistent in terms of what's been reported in the literature and equally low.
Great. Thanks, Roman. Thanks, Annabelle.
Your next question is from Balaji Prasad from Barclays. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for taking the questions. Maybe firstly, a question on DAXI itself. While I appreciate that approval launch looks a while away, have there been any conversations with the aestheticians about COVID being a fundamental shift in how aesthetics is provided, especially toxins, patients or consumers not wanting to be visiting clinics frequently or not wanting to be in close proximity with the providers? And how much of a tailwind could this be for DAXI when it eventually comes onto the market? Would it be a question of the right product at the right time?
So, Balaji, I think on that, I mean, overall, and again, if we look, for example, at the HintMD platform where we see some of the different, volumes coming through the accounts, injectable volumes have been actually pretty good. There's no doubt that there are some markets that have been more impacted than others that have seen a more challenged recovery due to, either consumers being less willing to engage or, frankly, some kind of getting out of the area. But I think by and large, since the first shutdown occurred, a lot of these aesthetic practices have figured out how to operate in this environment, through social distancing and safety protocols. And I think since a lot of consumers aren't traveling as much and are at home and are looking at themselves on Zooms all day, people are finding ways to kind of get into their practices to get treatment. What has changed, as I mentioned, is I think the willingness of some of these accounts to engage with industry more broadly. Again, just sort of the drop by, drop in. They want things to be a little bit more scheduled, and just so that they can ensure that the right kind of environment there. I think to your question around, would we see some sort of pent-up demand coming out of this once, people are immunized and we've reached some level of herd immunity, I certainly could see that, right? I think that, we believe that the underlying trends that existed pre-COVID will continue to prevail with, younger people engaging, people that are living longer and wanting to retain sort of the best version of themselves, want minimally invasive treatment. So we really like the overall growth characteristics of this market and would expect that we will see some pent-up demand. I don't know, Dustin, if you want to add anything to that.
I think you mentioned tailwinds. I think we see tailwinds because of the lack of innovation in the market for so long, right? So while COVID is the environment that we look at, Balaji, I think people want treatments that last longer. We've shown that study again, both done internally and externally, as you've shown. So we're excited to get out in the market to give people an option for longer-lasting treatment. So we do think there's tailwinds, whether they're relative to COVID or not, I can't say, but people are ready for daxibotulinum toxin for sure.
Great. Maybe a couple of other minor follow-ups. What's the latest update on biosimilar Botox? What stage are you in? Has there been any progress during the quarter? Secondly, also, maybe in terms of fillers itself, could you give us a sense of how many accounts you could plan to hit this year or reach this year?
So on the biosimilar, why don't I put that over to Abhay and he can comment on that.
Yeah, thanks, Balaji. So as you know that for biosimilar, we are in a partnership with Viatris, formerly called Mylan. That program is in the early development stage and is under collaboration with the two teams and progressing very nicely.
Thanks. And then in terms of number of accounts, again, I just don't think, Balaji, we're at a position yet where we can, give you that level of granularity. I think we're being very measured. We've talked about having roughly 100 reps out there. We've talked about, we're targeting the top third of the market. We want to make sure that we are focused on those accounts that we think see value in a prestige product offering, that see value in the pricing strategy that we put in place. And so we're much more focused on being measured and going deep versus wide. And certainly as we get data points that we have conviction behind, we're happy to start sharing those with you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Your next question is from David Amsellem from Piper Sandler. Your line is open.
Thanks. So just a couple. First, on the ULS program, can you just talk about, I guess, the rough contours of what a phase 3 program would look like, particularly in terms of the primary outcome measures, and how that might differ from what you did in the phase 2? And I apologize if I missed that, but wanted to get some granularity on that. And then secondly, in other therapeutic settings, I know, Mark, we've talked about migraine in the past. Any new color or thinking on your development plans for DAXI in migraine, and when we may get an update there? Thanks.
Sure. For the first question, why don't I hand it over to Roman on ULS and answer your question on phase 3.
Sure, Mark. So in terms of the phase 3 design, there are a few important points to consider. The first is relative to the primary endpoint. In a similar way that other sponsors have landed on a co-primary endpoint that's based upon one objective and another subjective endpoint, namely modified Ashworth score on the objective side and an assessment of improvement on the functional side or the subjective side. In our case, it's the PGIC, or the Physician Global Impression of Change. We would also, just like we did in phase 2, use those same two co-primary endpoints in discussion with FDA, and that would be our proposal. In addition, in terms of the overall design of the study, we would be looking to continue to evaluate the safety, but also the efficacy in terms of duration. So we would want to continue to follow patients all the way up to 36 weeks so that we can fully evaluate the long duration of our neuromodulator in this indication.
Great. Yeah, just to add on that, David, we would expect these to be 2 phase 3 programs along with an open label safety study. Those would be kind of the driving assumptions in this, and then the details obviously would be discussed as part of our end of phase 2 meeting with the agency. So stay tuned more on that later as we move forward. Then in your question on migraine, I think this falls in that overall bucket of our therapeutic strategy and platform. Clearly, we're furthest along in terms of the muscle movement disorder. The nice thing about that is, both CD and adult ULS align around a central point in neurology, so it's very focused and targeted. And with the CD, approval expected in 2023, that starts to move from being more of a commercial program to, around the corner to a commercial program, from a clinical to a commercial program. Clearly, we recognize and see the value of the migraine market. It's, a very large market, and as we kind of work our way through, this data and this analysis, we'll be spending a lot of time working our way through exactly, how much do we do internally? Do we partner any of it? How do we think about that long term? What I will say is, the thing that we really like about our neuromodulator product is that it is sort of a pipeline and a product, right? We can continue to access and turn on new markets as we invest in it, and we just got to balance sort of those investments in a way that we think is thoughtful, where we can make sure that we execute and deliver on the commercial end of things, while still having a really nice pipeline. So as we have more and we work our way through the details of the therapeutics platform, we'll share that with you.
Your next question is from Jacob Hughes from Wells Fargo. Your line is open.
Hey guys, thanks for taking my question. Most of my questions have been answered, but I just had a follow-up on the filler launch. I think you had a partial launch in the third quarter. Then we saw what the numbers are in the fourth quarter, and I think the aesthetic market has started to open up since then. So, are you able to parse out any COVID-related impact as we think about the first half of this year? And then also longer term, I think Teoxane had high single-digit or low double-digit share in Europe without a neurotoxin. So, how are you thinking about the share now as you've been in the market? Thanks a lot.